Sometimes I feel like a motherless child is an African-American spiritual that's included in Samuel Coleridge-Taylor's 24 Negro Melodies. Now, this particular spiritual is one that I heard very early on when I was growing up. And I remember the words of this spiritual really struck me to my core. It speaks of a figure, this mother, who serves as someone who guides you, someone who protects you, someone who nurtures you. And to think that all of these attributes would be stripped away, and we're left with this vulnerable child who's in a foreign land without a home. These are the feelings and the emotions of depression and agony and just utter sorrow. And these are the emotions that birth the African American spiritual. These melodies that I'll be sharing with you this evening, Samuel Coleridge-Taylor has really created this capsule during this period in African American, American history that may make us feel a little comfortable tonight. And I have to say, this music, it breathes life to those in this country who are uncomfortable. This music may make us feel ashamed when we think about slavery in America. But I have to say that this music, it breathes life to those who are shamed. This music truly speaks to the soul of humanity. And it's what I personally believe to be some of the most spiritually powerful music that ever emerged from America. So I would like to invite each of us this evening to step through this door, or this time capsule, if you will, that Samuel Coleridge-Taylor has created for us. And I want us to journey back to the height of slavery in America, more specifically, Nashville, Tennessee. We learned from the author Berwick Sayers that this particular melody, titled Troubled in Mind, was one of Samuel Coleridge-Taylor's favorite melodies. And he writes, taken from the lips of a slave in Nashville, Tennessee, who first heard it from her father, after the aged slave had been flogged or badly beaten, he always sat upon a log beside a cabin, and with tears streaming down his cheeks, he sang this song with so much pathos that few could listen without weeping.
I'm troubled, I'm troubled, I'm troubled
wondering who is the mastermind behind these amazing melodies and this body of work. Samuel Coleridge-Taylor, or Coleridge-Taylor, which he liked to be called, was born in 1875 in Holborn, London. His mother, Alice Martin, was an Englishwoman, and his father was an African physician from Sierra Leone. They met in London when he was practicing medicine. His father was an assistant and was well liked by his patients. So he then decided to start a practice of his own. But he soon realized the grave mistake it was by starting a practice as a black man. The hardships that Dr. Taylor faced made him return to Africa. Shortly after Dr. Taylor returned, Alice found out that she was pregnant with their child, Samuel Coleridge-Taylor. And if you're wondering, yes, he was named after the poet. Alice's family loved the arts and music, and they nurtured Coleridge-Taylor's musical talents. He became a gifted violinist and gained entry into the prestigious Royal Conservatory of Music in 1980 at the ripe age of 15. While at the conservatory, Coleridge-Taylor quickly realized that he wanted to create music instead of merely performing it. In 1895, he won the Leslie Alexander Prize for Composition. This prize made heads turn in England with who's who amongst the rising composers. It was this particular award that made Edward Elgar, the leading composer of England, take Coleridge-Taylor under his wings. Elgar wrote a letter saying, I have received a request from the secretary to write a short orchestral thing for the evening concert. I am sorry, but I am too busy to do so. However, I wish you would ask Coleridge-Taylor to do it. He still wants recognition and is far and away the cleverest fellow amongst the young men, end quote. With the help of Elgar, Coleridge-Taylor gained national recognition, which soon led to international fame. Samuel Coleridge-Taylor's music began to be performed not only in England, but across the United States. There was a chorale called the Samuel Coleridge-Taylor Society, which was established in the States and was comprised of African-American singers who were dedicated to programming Samuel Coleridge-Taylor's choral works. In 1904, the Washington Festival presented a 3-day concert series premiering Samuel Coleridge-Taylor's works. This was Coleridge-Taylor's first time in the United States, which made a lasting impression on his life and his body of musical works. His orchestral music was performed by the Philharmonic Society of New York, which is better known today as the New York Philharmonic. And they were so impressed by his work that they invited him to conduct his own composition. Now, you have to keep in mind just how brilliant and the magnitude that it was to have a black man in the early 1900s of this country, whose works are not only being performed by definitely the best orchestra in this country, but then they invited him to lead this orchestra under his baton. The New York Phil called him the Black Mahler after this concert. Now, I personally detest this remark because of the need to compare a black man to Western European composer to gain recognition. And I hope by the end of tonight you will see for yourselves that his music truly speaks for itself. He took 2 other trips to the United States in his life and was also invited to the White House by Theodore Roosevelt. During these concert series, an audience member writes to Samuel Coleridge-Taylor saying, "In composing, you have done the colored people of the United States a service I am sure you never dreamed of when composing. It acts as a source of inspiration for us, not only musically, but in other lines and endeavors. When we have the concerts here, for at least a month we seem, as it were, to be lifted above the clouds of American colored prejudice, and to live there oblivious of its disadvantages, and indeed, of most of our troubles. I personally love this quote because it speaks of the power of music and its ability to evoke so much emotions from within us that we can be temporarily taken away from our current state of mind, especially those that are so troubled. So now I want us to journey back to the height of American slavery, where ships from Africa were transporting enslaved Africans to America to be sold into slavery. When Africans were shipped like cargo to America, they would then have to endure the utterly humiliating experience of being sold, often on an auction block. The spiritual Many Thousand Gone, or No More Auction Block for me, depicts some of the most humiliating aspects of slavery. Professor Emeritus George Shirley helps convey this utter humiliation. Professor Shirley was the founder of the George Shirley African American Art Song and Operatic Aria Competition. He's also the first African American tenor to perform a leading role at the Metropolitan Opera House. And I must say, just also an incredible human being, and has been a giant for musicians in the classical music field, especially those of color. No More Auction Block for Me, or also known as Many Thousand Gone. Can you discuss the humiliation of an auction block, or the humiliation aspect of being enslaved?
Well, the auction block is not ever having been in that situation. I've certainly been close to it. I mean, whenever one goes out to give oneself and one is turned down, there's a little sense of what it might have been, but not really, because here you are, standing in front of people, possibly completely naked, partially naked, and someone is coming up to you and forcing your mouth open so they can see what shape your teeth are in, touching your body to see how strong you are, invading you. You know, today we have a situation in schools, let's say in music schools. In the past, where a music teacher, a voice teacher could go up to a student and just say, lay hands on you, not breathing properly and so forth. Today, we can't do that the way it was done 20, 30 years ago, because of the awareness that touching someone without their consent is an invasion of that person's self, invasion of privacy, if you will. So we always have to ask permission. Well, the auction block, there was no permission. The slave didn't have permission, didn't give permission for someone to come up and manhandle them in any way. So there you are, a human being, and another human being is getting ready to possibly buy you and checking you out physically to see if you are worthy of being purchased. They are also going to look at your family in the same way, your husband, your wife, your children, manhandle them, and possibly then take your children away from you because the children might be stronger than you. So it was a total humiliation of a human being that this supposed Christian nation was ignoring as a human being. That human being had become chattel, property, to be treated in the same manner as cattle, as chickens, or whatever. A child of God, but not in the eyes of those Christians who were buying them. So even all the more insults to this individual, these individuals, who were treated like objects, not children of God, not human beings.
The 24 Negro Melodies were commissioned by the Oliver Ditson Company, a publishing company from Boston, Massachusetts. They asked Samuel Coleridge-Taylor to arrange an album of Negro folk songs for piano. These pieces were composed and published in 1905, shortly after Coleridge-Taylor's first trip to America. There are 16 melodies that are traditional African American melodies, and then there are 8 melodies that are traditional African folk tunes. Now, I personally believe that the African folk tunes are paying homage to the father he never knew, and also representing the evolution of the Negro Melodies, with its roots beginning in Africa and then evolving to this highly emotional African American genre, the spiritual. In keyboard literature, the number 24 is quite significant. The Prelude and Fugues by Johann Sebastian Bach are set in 2 books, each containing 24 preludes and fugues. These preludes and fugues were monumental and a revolutionary body of work during the time of its composition. So much so that later, other composers like Chopin and Scriabin also wrote 24 preludes, which richly added to the piano literature. I believe that Coleridge-Taylor was making a profound statement and making his mark in keyboard music by creating a body of work that opens a door into African American experience. The melodies are pure, honest, and powerfully moving. You will notice that Samuel Coleridge-Taylor begins each spiritual with a simple and unadorned melody. Professor George Shirley speaks on the purity of these melodies by comparing them to Schubert Lieder.
In your article, you gave a comparison of Schubert Lieder and spirituals, and you said both are classical, both are spiritual. Can you elaborate on that?
Yes. Schubert's music is powerful. No one would deny that. But there's a simplicity about it, an honesty about it, without stuff to show off the voice. It encapsulates the essence of the text. And that's what the spiritual does. Simple without being simplistic, powerful, carrying the message of the words on a musical fabric that is unforgettable. If you listen to Schubert's works, the melodies come to you. If you have been exposed to them, you know that. It's the same with the spiritual. But there's no gingerbread. You know, it isn't bel canto or can belto. It's pure. Gospel is honest in its way, but it's full of decorations. People take it and I'm thinking, oh yeah, this would fit into the Baroque era. I mean, it's maybe more honest rather than just showing off the voice, but it's the same kinds of decorative decoration of the melodic line. But spirituals, you know, mess with. Sometimes I hear young people singing spirituals and it comes out sounding like gospel, and they say, this is arranged by Edgar Boatner. So I say, no, it's not. No, it's not. It's arranged by you, not by Edgar Boatner. So you have a right to write your own version of the spiritual. But do that and don't mess with whatever Boatner or Hall Johnson put on the page. I respect those composers the same way I respect Schubert. And I would not mess with Schubert's vocal line. It's already there. It's already as perfect as one can make it. I respect the hours that he put into creating those gems. The same way I respect the hours that Hall Johnson, Edward Boatner, Harry Thacker Burley, all of them put into creating what we sing. And I'm not going to mess with it. I don't have a right to mess with it. Because as soon as I start messing with it, it's no longer their arrangement. becomes mine, and I haven't got a right to put it on the program as theirs. If I can take that melody of Deep River, which I assume in its purity is what Burley heard. Deep river, my home is over Jordan. Deep river, Lord, I want to cross over into Camp Run. And I can do things with it, but then I have to put my name on it as the arranger of this folk tune. And if I do that, if I put the hours into creating that, my arrangement of it, I wonder how I'd feel if somebody got up and said, I'm going to sing Deep River arranged by George Shirley. And start doing stuff. I'll tell you how I'd feel about it. I'd say, oh, just a minute, whoa. Now, that's not mine. That's yours.
I love him. The next two spirituals, Going Up and Steal Away, can be referred to as code songs, or spirituals that had a hidden meaning. The slave owners enjoyed hearing slaves sing, but they didn't realize that their singing was a way of communicating to each other on how to escape to the north into freedom. Going up to see God meant traveling up north to freedom. Steal away to Jesus meant disappearing away into the night. In Going Up, you will hear a feature in spirituals called call and response. This is when a lead singer would sing a line or part of a verse by themselves, and the rest of the singers would join in the chorus, serving as the answer. Spirituals also possess highly rhythmic patterns, which you will hear in both Going Up and Steal Away. In the Journal of the International African Institute, Jones writes in 1954 that rhythm is to the African what harmony is to the European, and it's complex interweaving of contrasting rhythmic patterns that he finds his greatest aesthetic satisfaction. You will often hear syncopated rhythms in spirituals, as well as a 2-against-3 pattern. Now, this 2-against-3 pattern also conveys the unrest and the tension felt by the slaves.
Going up to see the heavenly
Wade in the Water is a popular spiritual that can be found in many hymnals today. This particular spiritual is believed to carry out specific hidden instructions on how to escape slavery and safely journey north to freedom. Many churches sing this spiritual and enjoy the references of both the Old and New Testaments. The verses of this song reference the book of Exodus in chapter 14, when the Israelites would escape the harsh slavery in Egypt. The chorus references the New Testament in the book of John, specifically chapter 5, verse 4, which states, "For an angel went down at a certain season into the pool and troubled the water. Whosoever then first, after the troubling of the water, stepped in was made whole of whatsoever disease he had. It was believed that those who stepped into the pool of water could be healed, and the slaves used this song to communicate with each other. When the slave owners went after the fugitives, especially when traveling with their hunting dogs to recapture the slaves would then immerse themselves into the water and continue to travel up north. The waters would mask their scent so that the hounds could not find them."
Children, wade in the
My hope this evening was not only to shed a light on the brilliant and monumental work of Samuel Coleridge-Taylor's 24 Negro Melodies, but to raise awareness of the vastness of what we call American music. This music was created during a dark time in our nation's history, and I believe that there is a great relevance today to call upon this music and give it the platform that it much deserves. We often find ourselves today looking for a spirit that can take us away from our current situations and way of life. I believe that this music, now more than ever, has the power to help us cope and understand our society as we move forward in a conflicting era in our nation's history.
Drugs take us away from the misery and the problems that we deal with every day. By taking us to some spiritual, if you will, place that makes us feel better. When we already have the power to do that embedded within us. So we look outside of ourselves for some way of connecting to our spiritual essence. Spirituals have a place that may be able to help those who are looking for something to find it in a more healthy manner. There are those of us who have really worked to increase the awareness of spirituals, to hear them being sung, to try to make a connection to what they are about. Today, many churches are struggling, the old line churches are struggling, because young people don't really have a connection to a spiritual power that I, as a Christian, would refer to as God, the intelligence that has created life and the universe. There is an intelligence. I don't doubt that. For me, as a Christian, that intelligence is God. For others, it's called by various names. But a lot of young people don't accept that. They know what they see. And if they can't see it, touch it, then it doesn't really exist. I mean, what are you talking about? I mean, some old man up in the sky with a beard and with blue eyes, that's not what God is. As a Christian, I look at God as what St. John says, that God is a spirit. And that the worship God must worship God in spirit and in truth. So for me, it's that spirit that has to be understood in this era of technology and science. And I think that science is moving more and more closely to some sense of, oh, rather than just what we see. When someone says to me, do you believe in what you can't see? I say, yeah. When's the last time you saw music? Well, there's those little symbols on the page. That's not music. Do you know music exists? Well, how do you know it exists? Well, I sense it. I sense the intelligence of life. I sense God as being real, because music is real, and I can't see it. So, being able to convince today's young adults of the power of something that you can't see, the power that will come to you without taking a pill or sniffing powder or drinking liquor. It's possible to find that. It's work, it's hard, there's no doubt about it. It takes faith. You can't be afraid of hard work. Hard work, when engaged in mindfully, will get you to where you are supposed to be. Without it, you don't make it. You don't get there. So yes, I think there's more of a need for the spiritual in music. Not just the black spiritual, but the spiritual in all music. You go to concerts today, arenas filled with young people hearing rock and the popular music. And the question is, for me, what kind of message is that sending to their spirits? And I think that more often than not, it's the wrong message. So, yes, the spiritual has, like in life, we have crests and troughs, like the ocean. Sometimes we're riding the crest. I think now we're sort of down in the trough and hoping again to rise to the crest again. And for me, the spiritual has a message that can help enable that rise.
This image that I have been sharing is a picture of Anne and Abe. Their family was owned by the Gills, who were local bankers in a town called Soperton in the state of Georgia. When I look at this picture of my great-great-grandparents, I try to study their faces and see if there may be a smile behind their eyes. I don't see it. I see tiredness, I see pain, but I also know that they had a strong faith in God, as did many slaves. And though they may not have been able to change their fate on earth, they believed that when they met their Maker, God, they would be in a place where there was no pain, where hate did not exist, chains did not exist. They would be free. That faith and great hope is what I believe was passed down generation to generation, and is what I like to believe is in my blood today. The last piece that I will perform this evening is quite personal for me. I remember this spiritual being sung in Georgia in my many trips when I went to visit my grandparents. It's a spiritual that takes a beautiful transformation and reaches a climax in C major. C major represents purity and spirituality. The climax is then briefly highlights E major, another bright key, and then D major. D major represents hallelujahs, shouts of joy, shouts of triumph. And the close of this piece reminds me of a person taking their last breaths on earth while they can hear the angels meeting them at heaven's gates. Always looking heavenward, always looking north, and always looking for their promised land.